Welcome, School Nation, to The Compass, a show where we discuss today's world from a Christian perspective. I'm Cameron Lomax Bird.
And I'm Taylor Hansel. Today, we will be talking about the vaping epidemic. Let's get started. Electronic cigarettes were first introduced into the U.S. market in 2006 and have evolved from nicotine delivery systems to sophisticated customizable devices that can deliver a range of illicit drugs. Although they are marketed as smoking cessation tools, e-cigarettes are rarely used for this purpose and have instead ended up in the pockets of every other young adult. This explosion of the cigarette industry has created a nicotine addiction epidemic across America.
According to the CDC, 1 in 20 Americans vaped in 2020. In addition, 14% of high schoolers, which is about 2.14 million teens, reported vaping. In February of 2020, almost 3,000 hospitalized cases, including 68 deaths, were caused by the condition. The CDC also reported over 80% of people hospitalized due to E-Valley, electronic vaping-induced lung injuries, reported using vaping products that contain THC.
For a deeper look into this issue, here's Isabel Matos.
Vaping is a pandemic that has spread across the country like wildfire, unfortunately targeting many adolescents. Cigarettes were first introduced in the United States in the 1900s and took the country by storm. By the 1970s, scientists were able to find a relationship between excessive smoking and lung cancer. It didn't take long for companies to create an alternative that was supposedly better than smoking. The first commercialized e-cigarette was first introduced in the United States in 2006. In the last decade, there has been a significant increase in the use of vape products by adolescents.
Well, it started in middle school. I used to get pods and jewels from people that were older than I was.
The age group has been targeted in numerous ways, such as ads, packaging, and flavors.
Well, this past November, I had the flu, and then I also developed double pneumonia, like pneumonia in both of my lungs. And my lungs were just weaker than they would have been if I didn't vape. So it developed into this rare condition called Lumiere's. And I got holes in both of my lungs. And I had to go through some surgeries and stuff. And they had put me in a coma for like 20 days.
In December 2019, President Trump signed a law into effect changing the federal minimum age of tobacco sales from 18 to 21. This includes cigarettes, cigars, and e-cigarettes. Although such a new product, vapes have spread across the country like wildfire. The media and pop culture have accepted vaping and have widely influenced many young people.
Honestly, like, we've all seen the ads on like social media where it's like the quit vaping ads and the side effects and stuff. And everybody always thinks like it wouldn't be you, like that wouldn't happen to me, but it definitely could. Like, it could happen to anybody. So yeah, it's just not worth it, honestly.
As we continue to learn more and more about how vaping does affect the human mind and body, research and regulations should be made to prevent future addiction and health issues caused by vaping. This is Isabel Matos with MC SWU.
This is what winners are made of. This is what leaders are made of. This is what scholars are made of. This is what believers are made of. This is what warriors are made of.
Welcome back. I am now joined by Dr. Stacy Johnson, who is the chair of the School of Science, Technology, and Mathematics and Associate Professor of Biology. Thank you for being here with me today, Dr. Johnson.
Good to be here.
What are your thoughts about people substituting smoking for vaping?
So if you look at the data that has been collected since vaping has become more popular, you'll see that there are many similar risk factors between smoking and vaping. And some data actually indicate that vaping might be more dangerous because the substances that are within the vape liquid itself are not necessarily plant-based. And so you can introduce new toxic chemicals, higher levels of toxic chemicals, and even in some cases you can introduce pathogens like bacteria or viruses or other damaging living things to your lungs. So there isn't any data at this point that is indicating that vaping is more safe than smoking.
What do you think about the packaging and flavored of e-cigarettes targeted at teens and young adults?
So I think this is interesting that this question has come up because this is a similar argument, if you will, that was used against tobacco products many years ago. There was criticism of the tobacco industry of targeting young people for their products. And we're seeing similar arguments again today. And I think that that's valid. Some of my children's friends, one in particular, was actually hospitalized after he was kind of, I hate to say, lured in by the packaging and the marketing used to target young people, and spent almost a month in a coma, medically induced coma, due to damage to his lungs and body by vaping. So, you know, there's certainly risk there, and we know that there's specifically targeting youth by the way they're marketing these products. And so that's really concerning. That's something that we should pay attention to and should try to help prevent.
I agree. How do you believe vaping affects the lifestyle of a student?
So vaping is like any other substance that you might become addicted to. And so it can absolutely have impacts on your body and as your life as a student. So any addiction is going to require time. And as students, there's already a lot of demands on your time, whether that's assignments, going to class, or having a job. There's many things that students are doing and need to do. And any addiction, like vaping, can really cut into that time. I think sometimes students are drawn to some of these products because they promise increased attention span and, you know, other things, increased energy. And while there may be some of those side effects, the negative side effects really kind of outweigh any positive effects that you might have in increased attention, like damage to your body.
So how addicting is vaping? What are some of the physical and mental effects that vaping has on the human body?
So it certainly does depend on what substance is being used in the vape itself as to how addictive it is. But we know that nicotine is a common ingredient for vapes, as well as other substances, sometimes even THC, which is the active ingredient in marijuana, is added in some of these products. So when we think about the physical effects, well, let's start with mental. So the mental effects of nicotine and THC, we know that they can be addictive. But when you switch over to the physical effects, nicotine actually increases your heart rate, it increases your blood pressure, and that's talking about how it is crossing over into the bloodstream and is affecting other organs besides just your lungs. We have seen, as I mentioned, one of my children's friends who was ill. It seems that vaping introduced a pathogen into their lungs that almost ate away their lung tissue and damaged their lungs permanently. So we are seeing a lot of the same impacts that tobacco cigarettes have had on people's bodies, but at times it's turned up because we can increase the amounts of those substances in the e-cigarettes, and that can have an even greater impact on the body. So mentally, I think the draw is that nicotine does tend to give you increased energy and increased attention. But again, if you're damaging your lungs, if you're causing cardiovascular problems, or if you're infecting your lungs with a really damaging pathogen, I don't think the increased attention may be worth the risk.
So how does vaping affect those around them?
So similar to tobacco cigarettes, vaping, we're inhaling the drugs and substances, but all of that drug and substance doesn't cross into the blood in one trip into the lungs. So when the individual who's vaping exhales, they're blowing out a lot of those same substances. So the idea of secondhand smoke, which we saw with tobacco cigarettes, is still a concern. Those people around the individual, while they're not getting the same dose of those substances, they're still being exposed to them. And because we know that many of those substances that are in the e-cigarettes were in the tobacco cigarettes and are toxic to our cells, it can cause damage, especially with prolonged exposure, or if you're in a closed room with multiple people who happen to be using a vape. You can have similar impacts because you're getting perhaps a very high level, even though not as high as the person directly vaping, still a high level of those substances into your own body.
Well, thank you for your insight. We'll be right back after the break.
Wake up and focus. Because this is not a drill. This is not about cliches, shallow taglines, or some inspirational quote for you to tweet, snap, pin, or post. No, this is where snooze buttons are frozen. Alarm clocks are broken, where feet hit the floor because dreams are now woken. This is it. Awaken your dreams. Awaken your soul. Awaken your purpose. This is Southern Wesleyan University.
Welcome back. I'm now joined by Alicia Brosco, a senior psychology major here at SWU. How are you today, Alicia?
I'm pretty good.
Awesome. As a psychology major, how do you believe vaping affects the human body emotionally, mentally, and physically?
Yeah, so all vaping products contain a chemical called nicotine, which is the same addictive chemical found in cigarettes. Some people don't know that, but yeah, so like cigarettes would, or really any drug would affect your brain, nicotine and other harmful chemicals in vaping products actually can rewire your brain to create those addictive habits that form overall addiction. And so, yeah, that definitely does spill over into physical components, obviously, but emotional and spiritual as well, and even affect your relationships. And so, like any addiction would affect you emotionally, yeah, it definitely can have effects. So.
Right. How addictive is vaping?
Yeah, it's highly addictive. Yeah, some people would say it's like the safer form of smoking, but that's definitely not true. It's the same harmful chemicals, a little bit different than you would find in cigarettes, but yeah, definitely still has the power to be just as addictive as smoking other forms. So.
Got you. How do you believe vaping affects someone spiritually?
Yeah, so there's two sides of that question, really. I think it definitely does have the potential to draw you away from your faith. I've heard a lot of people that struggle with addiction do tend to feel guilty, or like the social circles or culture of church or other faith are less accepting of things like that. And so there's that side to it. But I've also heard on the other side in recovery where that's actually really helpful for people to find an outlet that people are more accepting of just people in different walks of life and the journey that they're on to recovery. And so, yeah, I think there's two sides of that.
Yeah. Do you think vaping in the media and pop culture is an influence on young people and adults?
Yeah, I think with any trend, there's obviously media influence. And so I think of things like, you know, even down to the shoes that we wear or the food that we eat or just some of the habits, like skincare is a popular thing that I've seen. And so it definitely can have the potential to either promote or dissuade people from vaping. So.
Yeah, right. Tell me your experiences, thoughts on vaping. How do you think vaping has affected your fellow peers?
Yeah, so it's not something that I've ever done and probably will never do, but yeah, I haven't known a ton of people in my immediate social circle that have done it, but outside of that and beyond, I've had family members who've been vaping or smoking even, and yes, had some serious health problems as a result. And so, yeah, I think seeing the flip side of some healthier options of just leaning into community, and even forming healthier physical habits as well have helped people a lot recovering from mental health even, which is a huge thing in our generation. So.
Thank you for your time, Alicia.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll be back with more after the break.
Hi, I'm Madeline Barrett. I am a Southern Wesleyan graduate, class of 2021. I majored in media communication in a concentration of public relation. I am currently at the reserves at Lake QE here at the sales office. I work with Coldwell Banker Kane. This original position was part-time, and then my supervisor saw my resume and saw all of the things that I've done at Southern Wesleyan, including hosting a number of talk shows, creating an Instagram account for our communications department, and she thought, wow, you just have blown me away with all of these amazing things you've been a part of, and I want to offer you a full-time position here. Southern Wesleyan invested in me, and I got a return on my investment.
What if there's a place for you where your dreams and future collide with God's vision and direction, where thinking and doing go hand in hand with innovation, where servant leaders of the next generation are grown, and where your story can be written and change the course of history, where generosity is contagious, and if you catch it, you just might change the world. This is it. Step into community, step into faith, step into life, step into Southern Wesleyan University.
Vaping is an epidemic that we must not become victims of. Over the past few years, vaping has been marketed by the sensation of nicotine and the different intensifying flavors. Taylor, how do you feel about this being marketed towards young people?
Honestly, I think it's probably one of the biggest issues that young teens have to go through right now is, as young teens and as the world that we live in right now, kids are just trying to find a way to escape. And I think this is one of the most dangerous ways the kids to escape is using drugs to get away from their problems, especially now that we don't know the long-term effects of e-cigarettes. It's highly dangerous, and we see kids all over getting hospitalized for abusing these drugs. So I'm very passionate about trying to find a way that we can stop this epidemic.
Yeah, I agree. I think with the kids being so young, we always think, how do we become the coolest, or how do we fit in? And I think the term of fitting in has become the source of vapes. I remember being in high school and kids who I knew growing up who have never thought of something like that have been introduced to it by the cool kids, and since then they are addicted. And I think a lot of the times we force that onto people as a cool thing, and a lot of the times it's not cool at all because it's affecting your body long-termly without you even knowing. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Compass. Join us next week as we talk more about sport injuries.